We've probably heard about the changes made at CrossFit. Justin Bergh is out, Dave Castro is in. But do we know why? So recently the news broke that Justin Bergh will no longer be the general manager of sport at CrossFit, and in his place we will have Dave Castro. Now, if you're someone who's just casually scrolling through social media, it's understandable that you might think that Justin Bergh was single-handedly trying to destroy the CrossFit Games, and now Dave Castro is back, he'll be able to protect this thing that he single-handedly built up. So some people might be a little bit confused. Now, of course, no one can deny how much work Dave Castro has done in building up the CrossFit Games. But we can't forget that for a lot of it, Justin Bergh was there with him. And of course, we feel sorry for Dave Castro when we think back to what happened to the Games when it was stripped back, when the media team was let go, the damage that was done to this thing he'd been working so hard to create. But again, let's not forget that Justin was also working hard, doing what he could to help progress the CrossFit Games forward. And it seems like that element is quite often overlooked or misunderstood by many people. It was actually interesting to see Alison Scudds in the comment section of the Morning Chalk Up article just explaining to some people why she appreciated what Justin Bergh had done for the sport of CrossFit. The other bit of confusion is with regards to Dave Castro coming back. Yes, Dave is coming back to the sports team, but he is coming back in a new role. This is not the job he had before he was let go. So we're still going to have to wait and see exactly what Dave does in this new position. But beyond all of this, there are some interesting questions we could be asking ourselves about why this has happened. Why the change? And is this just the first of maybe more changes to come? Now, regarding this recent news about Justin Bergh, a new episode of Talking Elite Fitness has dropped where Sean, Tommy and Lauren, together with Brian Friend, are talking about an interview that they had with Justin Bergh that now they've decided not to release, at least at this time, as well as some other insights that they've picked up just from being behind the scenes during this CrossFit season. Now, of course, I'd recommend if you've got the time, you go and watch the full episode on YouTube or you listen to it as a podcast. But anyway, I'm going to pick out 2 points I think are very interesting as they reveal why this change could have happened and also potentially if more changes are to come. Now, before I jump to that, just a new thing that I wanted to start doing in these videos is taking a moment to thank everyone who watched and commented on the last video. So it was about Grid League, also had a lot of DMs on Instagram with people asking questions about that. So fun conversations there. And some of the top comments on the video were, of course, from Grid League themselves, fans of the merch that I made, appreciate that. And Sam LaRoche, who's got a very interesting technique for picking his team to follow this season. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comments get left on this video about the whole Justin Bergh situation. Speaking of, let's go over and see what Sean, Tommy, Lauren and Brian had to say.
Now he's made a big decision here in June regarding the Games team, but I'm not that surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if there were more decisions coming regarding the Games team. I don't know exactly why he chose to do this now, but the fact that he chose to do something with regards to personnel in the Games department after deciding to do that in the other departments isn't really in a vacuum that surprising.
Well, it's like when a head coach gets fired in the middle of a season, you don't get rid of all the assistants too. You know, like you got to have someone there who's somewhat familiar with what's going on with the team, and you appoint a new head coach and then you figure it out at the end of the season.
I want to address what Sean said about the assistant coaches real quick before that. If you are, involved in the Games team and you see this happen, I think you got to be pretty honest with yourself. There have been mistakes made at each part of the season this year, last year that are they've been illuminated by the media. They've been pointed out by the athletes. They're known. Coming up to the Games now, Don's made a big decision. I'm assuming Don and his team have made a big decision here. And the Games team needs to be on high alert. You need to have a really successful, whatever your job is, to pull off at the Games, because those assistant coaches that last through the season don't always make it in the off season. But if they rise up and show that, when given the right environment, I can do my thing very well, sometimes they end up with a promotion.
Now this, I think, is interesting because when we talk about the many mistakes that were made throughout the season so far this year, of course, ultimately the buck stops with Justin. It's his job. He's the one in charge. But when we think about these mistakes, how much of it truly is his fault? He wasn't loading the barbell incorrectly. He's not the one posting incorrect information on social media. I doubt he designed the software for the leaderboard for the age groups that got messed up. But is this all a result of a lack of direction and oversight? Was he maybe being too focused on the big picture that he didn't pay attention to small details that then created bigger problems? Or was he trying his best with a small team to deliver an incredibly big product? And potentially, could there be more changes to come? So at this point, those that are working in the sports team, well, they really need to pull it together. Now, was it Justin holding them back, or were they causing the problems and he just didn't catch them? And if that is the case, is he simply the first domino to fall with many more changes to come? Now, why that might be interesting to think about, another question is, well, were these the problems that cost him his job? Again, if you're someone who's just casually scrolling through Instagram, for example, you could probably find a number of examples posted up that you might feel justify him being removed from his position as general manager of the sport. But if ultimately we remember that this is a business, there may be a much simpler reason for this change.
And you mentioned this when we were talking about the things that Justin mentioned about, hey, we made mistakes here. And to me, the big one that stood out, the huge one that was a big red flag, was the financial stuff. And my guess is that that was the major deciding factor here. And, go back to the layoffs. It's like they're looking to tighten up the ship here as far as like the financial things go, adhere to a budget, make sure they're not going over, making adult decisions. And that was I just think that was probably the biggest factor here. Not saying that, making mistakes during the season isn't, but I have a feeling that in the community out there, like that's going to get overplayed. And I don't think that was a big factor here. Could be wrong, but that's just a feeling I'm getting.
No, and it absolutely makes sense. Don Fall assessing the landscape of the company, he might have been aware that there were some things that could be better in the game side, but he might have seen some, traumatic bleeding going on in the affiliate side. And
right.
He's like, well, I'm going over there first. If all of a sudden, he starts hearing like, oh yeah, well, the games team, they had the wrong weights on the bar. He's like, okay, well, what'd they do about it? Well, they adjusted the scores and the girls have to do it again. Okay, that's not a big deal. Okay, well, they kind of had an unclear standard on the V-ups during quarterfinals. He's like, okay, what do you want me to do about that? Then they say, well, actually, they've totally mismanaged the budget and we're short however much money for the season. Suddenly you've got
that'll get your attention. Yeah.
So if you're thinking, about it from his perspective, he has to be aware of the financial landscape and reality for the company. And if there is a significant financial issue on the game side of things, absolutely, that would be something that would be a precedent for him to step in and make a big decision.
So does this all just come down to a problem of finance and money? Is it pressure from partners, stakeholders, those that are supporting CrossFit financially that are not seeing a good enough return on their investment? As Sean Woodland pointed out, mismanaging a budget is a huge red flag. And it might be that they don't expect them to break even just for it to be considered a success. People pay money for marketing. And of course, the CrossFit Games season, all the different events that make up that season, is a massive marketing opportunity for CrossFit. But at a certain point, potentially they want them to be losing less money. Or even if they know they're going to constantly be losing money, maybe they just need it to be such a smooth, well-polished spectacle that they can see the investment paying off down the line with more and more people flocking to CrossFit. Now, of course, fans of the sport or those that are competing, well, it's the mistakes that we're seeing highlighted on social media that really disturb us because it's the things that rob us of enjoyment from following the CrossFit Games season. But I would propose that probably for CrossFit HQ, it's the opposite, right? They can forgive mistakes as long as money's flowing in the right direction. But once issues start to crop up there, it's much harder to forgive the mistakes over here. Now, of course, we can speculate on all of this as much as we like, but ultimately the real test, well, that is going to be next year, next season. Are things going to be better? Will they improve? Well, there's a good chance that they will. But at the same time, there could be things that Justin Bergh has been handling very well that we've been taking for granted that we might start to notice if they're not happening next season. So I guess only time will tell. So that kind of covers Justin going out. But what about Dave coming back in? Well, I guess that's a topic for a future video.